And we're joined by a special guest today, Miles Lego Craig. Miles, do you want to do a quick intro? Tell everybody who you are and how you fit into this little circle.
Yes, hello everybody. Thanks for inviting me here again. I'm a CEO of a company called XWP, and we're a world-leading enterprise WordPress agency for enterprise publishers is our specialty. But prior to that, I was at News Corp Australia for 23 years and always in enterprise digital tech. So I've built a lot of digital tech and lived to regret some of them, but others were very successful. So,
all right. So we're going to get straight to the point of a really big question. It's a 288 billion US dollar question, which is basically $500 billion Australian dollars. So it's a question that we should really ask. And the question is, can a publisher consortium align to take over control of Google Chrome? Okay, so I'm going to set the scene. Google Chrome is the browser that 67% of all the people in the world use. That's 3.7 billion people, and it generates somewhere in the region of 13 to 17 trillion page views of news content, or page views of content every single day. It's the backbone of Google's entire business. Chrome is where it captures a lot of the data. Chrome is where the content is consumed. Chrome is where a lot of people sign in for services, and all of that information flows back to Google and Google's money-making machine. Now, under the antitrust actions that have taken place, Google is once, twice, three times a monopoly. And one of those is in search. And it was very astutely recognized by the DOJ that Chrome was the keystone of the arch of that business. And so when it's talking about remedies, which basically means fixing the problem, so we remove the monopoly, the very first remedy that the DOJ has requested is to force Google to divest, sell, get rid of Chrome, which means Chrome needs a new owner or a new management, okay, in a post-Google ownership world. And we're actually going to find out in not very long. It's the 29th of May today, and we're going to find out in mid-August whether this is going to go ahead. But I think everybody's pretty much accepted it is. So the question is who's going to get Chrome? Who is going to become the new custodian of 2/3 of the internet, right? And that is a big question. All right, now, here's the interesting thing. And I'm doing all the talking, so I'm setting the scene. I've just come back from chatting to publishers all over the UK, all over America, all over the Middle East, talking about the same thing. And the general view of the publishing world so far has basically been, well, one of the tech companies will have it. But that's not going to happen because the DOJ isn't going to allow OpenAI or Perplexity or Microsoft or Apple to get hold of Chrome, because all it's going to do is create a new monopoly, replacing the one it's just getting rid of. So that's just not going to happen. The second question is, all right, well, it's going to go to private equity, right? But that's completely wrong as well, because Apollo stepped up. Apollo is the owner of Yahoo. They've stepped up and said they'll do it, out of the goodness of their heart. But you see, that's not going to happen either, because the DOJ is breaking Google off to create new competition and new innovation, and private equity is about profit. So it's not going to be interested in spending money and building what comes next. Then people have said, well, it will be rolled off as a government entity or some sort of utility. But the problem is that can't happen either, because every country in the world's got a different opinion of how the web should work, and that won't work either. So if you kill big tech and you ignore private equity and you discount government, fourth is the publishing industry. So in actual fact, the publishing industry is in the pole position to become the new owner, conductor, whatever you want to call it, of Chrome. So that's where we're at. Thoughts?
Miles, I'll let you go first.
Okay, look, I think this is a massive opportunity, right? And it's going to take some visioning, because the opportunity is for the publishers to own the machine, right? And you talk about it, controls discovery, distribution, monetization, identity. It controls all that as the gateway between the user and pretty much the people who generate the premium content of what they're using their machine for, right? which is publishers. And that's not just publishers in America, that's publishers in Australia, it's publishers in Estonia, it's publishers in Zimbabwe, it's publishers everywhere that are going to benefit from publishers owning Chrome, right? And I agree, it's not going to be other entities as well for the reasons you outlined, but also because I think it's what they're going to look for an owner. One of the things they're going to do with antitrust and break things up is because the consumers are missing the benefits, right? Your consumers are missing benefits and the market's paying, wrong price for things. So they're going to look for an owner who can bring those missing consumer benefits around innovation, choice, and privacy. And some of those, definitely Google and some of those other entities, are not incentivized to bring those missing benefits to consumers, where publishers can be, right? And don't get me wrong, publishers should look for bringing publisher benefits to ownership of Chrome as well, but they don't care about, funneling data sucking traffic to Google search queries type of thing and monetizing that in, as you would say, Ricky, in illegal ways, right? So, and the other one I think is figure out who's hurt. Who's hurt by this is publishers have been hurt by this and advertisers have been hurt by this. So finding an owner that's going to remedy those hurts. I mean, publishers are going to be, right in a good position to justify being owners of Chrome, right? So.
Yeah. So just before you jump in, Chris, I was going to add two things on that. So the first thing is it's not just publishers and advertisers who've been hurt, so have consumers. Yeah. So Google has been an absolute pain since the case to say we're the best search engine in the world. That's not true. They don't know that's true, and no one knows that's true because no one's seen what search would have been because no one else has had a chance. So I need them to just shut the fuck up about that. They're not the best, and no one knows, okay? If everybody in the world drove a Lada would be the best car on the road, and it isn't. So let's just kill that. The second thing is I do use the word illegal a lot, but that's funny because the DOJ uses the word illegal 11 times in its remedies document. So I'm not particularly worried about using illegal. It's illegal. Chris, thoughts?
Mine would be, I agree it's a massive opportunity because one of the problems we talked about most of all is the sort of the closing of the open web. And this is essentially a gateway to an open, it's the potential to have one of the doors that isn't owned by a platform that sits behind it and dictates all of the behavior that happens within. So I think it's a massive opportunity. I think if you look back probably at innovations at the browser level in the last 20 years, you'd be scratching around to find anything that had really kind of moved the dial there because it's not an area of the world in which people have invested. So if I think from a publisher perspective, one of my biggest challenges right now is how am I going to generate direct traffic in a world where every walled garden is gradually closing their grip on the customers that they've got. A route to direct traffic is one of my biggest strategic challenges. Having a consortium of publishers that owns one of the open doors and is able to innovate within that interface to consumers to say, here are some of the places that you could go. That is a massive opportunity, and so I think it's at that point hugely attractive. And then my brain, being my brain, says, okay, I really want to understand. If I pull Chrome apart, do I get to Chromium? If I pull Chromium apart, is there a Google is there a mess of wires behind there that has to be untangled? So the practicalities of how to do it kind of slightly daunting, but the opportunity is massive enough to make it worth it, would be my view.
All right, so let me jump in. Miles, you're an engineer. I know you're a really, really good one because I've admired you and worked with you for a long, long time. No, but that's why I've invited you on, mate. I don't invite muppets on, I know you're good at what you do. And so you've got a situation where you've got somewhere between, it depends on which number and which day it is, Google has a different number for how many people work in Chromium and how much it costs. It was originally 1,000 people and 600 million. And by the end of the trial, it was 3,004 billion as OPEX. Okay, but that doesn't really matter because it spins off $266 billion of revenue and operates on 99.3% profit margin. So not a massive concern how much it costs to operate, to be fair. But in this scenario, breaking it off feels really daunting and it feels way beyond the capability of any publisher companies or even a consortium of publishers. Except for the fact you're not talking about changing the way this business and Chromium operates. What you're talking about is changing the way it's managed. So you've got the people there that have done it for many years. You've got people there who are very expert at it and very passionate about it. What you're talking about is taking over the management of the asset. And there have been many examples over the years of companies taking over something very complicated and being able to continue to manage it. So I want to be clear that we're not proposing to fire all of the engineers that currently work in Chromium. We're proposing to bring them under new management, and the new management has a slightly different direction, but ultimately you still want the browser to be brilliant. So, Chris, I know you've done some M&A work. Thoughts on that?
I mean, I think taking over management is perfectly standard stuff in terms of taking a company out of a company, you know, working out which of the management structure you want to keep, which has to change. That divorce part of working out, you know, which parts are definitely Chrome and which parts are more Google. It's kind of hard to see at the moment because it's not quite clear what the sort of remains of Google look like. So what is left over the course of the 2 trials, by the time we get to the end of this year, you know, what is the operating version of Google, and therefore what are you kind of pulling out? I think that's but I don't think that should be a reason. I think the thing that bothers me a little more is going back to your revenue numbers and saying, so if you start to pull apart Chrome the interface, Chromium the back office part of it. So just to be clear, Chromium has other clients, I think, doesn't it? Chromium is the back office of other browsers, right? So
Bing, and Mozilla,
So I assume if you're taking Chrome, are you taking just the front bit, or are you taking Chromium out of Google?
You're taking all of it. Yeah.
Okay, so that comes out. To go back to your revenue figure, when you pull that apart, how much revenue comes with the browser, and how much revenue that is, yes, it's activated through the browser, but it actually sits in the remaining parts of Google? That bit I'm not totally clear about. And I don't know if they've given any guidance in the trial that I've seen that sort of separates those two things. I don't know what your view is of that, Ricky.
Oh, well, they haven't. But look, the way it simply works is that Chrome, think about the way that Chrome works. Quite a lot of people have said to me in the last couple of days, oh, you know, but Chrome doesn't make any money. And I go, well, you see, without Chrome, like a lot of Google doesn't work, okay? It's like having a door that's locked and you need a key to open it. So, you know, when you go to Chrome, first time ever, and you open it, okay, then the first thing it gives you is just a Google search screen. So no surprise that it funnels an enormous amount of searches to Google's search, which is what drives a ton of Google's revenue. So it's very clever. Plus, all of those people are sitting in Chrome looking at all the pages. You know, 1 minute they're looking at flower arranging, and the next minute they're looking at, you know, what's happening in the Ukraine. All of those page views, all the data from that's being captured and fed back into the Google machine to monetize, right? And so when you look about how much of the open web is monetized by Google, whether it's monetized on Google's owned and operated services like YouTube and search, or whether it's monetized by Google Ads and AdX and GAM on the rest of the open web, it's pretty much 2/3 of it, right? Or actually, it might be slightly about half. So without Chrome driving the traffic and the data and the search volumes, the rest of it just doesn't work. So you have to remember that there's a separate trial with a separate remedy, which is proposing to break out all of Google's ad tech. So you are taking the traffic and the revenue and breaking both away. And so there's going to be a period of significant chaos. Go ahead.
Yeah. Well, I think that's right. And I think it's also, when you own both the front office and the back office, you don't have any commercial deals between those two things because you own both bits. And so, you know, there isn't, in some ways, when you then move the front office to a different place, the first thing you'd realize is that you have all the traffic and therefore the ability to commercialize that in terms of giving access to different people to that traffic. Now, Google never does that to itself, right? Because it's just passing it.
No, I think Google itself is 3 billion users globally, right? How many trillions of queries they use that through Chrome, right? And if you were to buy Chrome, and I don't know if you're going to talk about price, Ricky, but it could be $1, it could be $20 billion, right? But then what you're offering to people who may want a license to be your search engine for Chrome, and that could be Google, it could be Bing, it could be someone else, what you could license to be the Gen AI tool inside Chrome, right? And that could be OpenAI, it could be Claude, or it could be Copilot, it could be anyone.
Or it could be one you make yourself.
It could be one you make yourself, or it could be different licenses for different regions of the world, right? So if you want to be the Gen AI for Europe or the Gen AI for Americas, or even by users can choose their own Gen AI tool that they want to integrate with the browser, right? So And then, and that's part of the business case. But then the other one is, if you've got how many trillions of queries and then 3 billion users, why wouldn't publishers say, well, we know confident that our consortium or publishers worldwide, approved publishers, and have direct affiliate links or referral links directly up there and not be summarized, put them up the top. 1% of 1% directly to publishers would probably save the publishing industry in advertising and subscription alone, right? So,
and that is the point. So, and that's exactly the point. So, it's very difficult to put a price on Chrome. People keep asking me to. A couple of numbers have been bandied around. The way I kind of view it is that, for those of us that work in publishing that remember what it was like in the good old days of publishing when we sold advertising, right? Then the answer for how much is Chrome worth is how much is how much is 8 trillion ad impressions a year worth? That's how much Chrome can generate. But something that keeps getting lost, and several publishers have said to me in the last little while, oh, but Ricky, it's going to cost 20 billion, 50 billion, 100 billion. We don't have that money. It's not going to cost anything. Okay. And so I've been making this case for some time. The reason that the DOJ is breaking this company up isn't because it just wants to do it. Okay. And it just feels that the company's too big. It's doing it to try and foster new competition in the market. And if it wants new competition in the market, it's going to hobble competition by charging $100 billion to the new buyer. What it should do is just let it transfer to the new buyer for nothing. Now, people always look at me with shock and like, what are you talking about, Ricky? That's ridiculous. What about the Google shareholders? The DOJ doesn't care about the Google shareholders. The money it's making is the proceeds of crime. So it has no interest whatsoever in providing a return. So because I want to make this case and not just sound like a raging publisher protectionist, okay, I went and did some research. So when AT&T was broken up, okay, it was worth about $100 billion at the time, okay? So today it would be worth about $1 trillion. So it would be worth about a third of what Google is valued at right now, okay? When that company was broken up into what became known as the baby bells, the other companies, okay, $0 changed hands, zero. Okay. And what happened was that the new owners gave equity to the previous shareholders of the other company to smooth the transition. They didn't need to, they offered to. But here's the interesting thing. Since they broke up that monopoly that everybody believed was the pinnacle of innovation at the time, the companies that they've spun off have now generated 3.7 times as much value as the company before it was broken. So this doesn't break an economy, it opens a new one. And I think we just need to remember that's what this is all about.
And I agree, because what Chrome is now and the economy around Chrome is not what Chrome will look like in the economy around Chrome going forward, right? And that's almost the art of the possible that really a publisher consortium needs to appreciate. That don't think about it just as your reduction of advertising revenue and your the ripping out of page impressions. Think about the economy that's going to drive out of a Chrome and out of a gateway to 3 billion people globally that you're going to be able to govern and manage, right? So,
well, I suppose I'll ask the question that way, which is if you went to publishers and you said, forget the actual Chrome deals on the table, what's the value to you of control of distribution to some, a small amount of control of distribution into the future? At the moment, that would be the thing that most publishers would find the money to invest in. And if you do it as a consortium and you add together all of the value of that to all of the publishers, I think you get to a valuation. The other thing not to ignore is you're going to have a like if you said tomorrow, right, it's done. Google have decided it's a transfer and fine, publishers have taken it over. You're going to need, at least 12 months, probably 18, sensibly 24. I come from News Corp, so you'd say 36, and people would shoot you. So it's but you need a period of transition. In the period of that transition, Google continues to take the revenue in the way that it does. So essentially, even if you took it for nominally nothing, during that transition arrangement you'd have to put in place, most of that profit would still flow to Google. So and the other thing is, in a negotiation, when you're sitting across the table and you say, well, now let's talk about price, but by the way, it's illegal for one of us to continue to own it. So, so let's begin from there.
Yeah, it's good negotiation, isn't it? Yeah. So you're talking to me shackled behind a glass wall, okay? Yeah. And your negotiation tactic is what exactly? Yeah. But look, I don't want to glorify the pain of Google here, okay? This is really about trying to create a better search experience. Now, you have to remember that until about 18 months ago or 2 years ago, we were still blue links, right? And we put up with that for 20 years, and that's absolutely insane, okay? And so I think that, you know, the ability for us to see innovation in how a browser should work for us in the world that we were living in, we totally missed out on that because we were probably 10 years too late in dealing with Google's monopoly. And so that's been a real shame and a missed opportunity. But we now have time to catch up. What also happened here, though, is that Google very clearly and intentionally decided that at some point it was an inevitability it was going to be broken up, and therefore it was going to make as much money as it could for as long as it could, and kind of all rules were off. And I think you could probably say that the starting gun on that was the day that it dropped its Don't Be Evil moniker, or maybe when it bought DoubleClick. But either of those two things was then about owning all the money that existed on the open web. And by the way, it's done a terrific job of it. But what's happened is that we in the publishing industry have been caught in the crossfire of that land grab, that greedy, hungry hippo, eat absolutely everything market model that it's been going at. And it's taken us too long to recognize that that's the cause of the problem that we've got, you know. And so now we're kind of doing a really, really hard break, a really painful break when we're all exhausted and at the end of our tether. And now we have to find the energy to build what comes next, because what we've had has led us almost to death, right? So it's difficult then to get everybody to wake up and just go, sure, let's go again, let's go really hard. So we're going to have to energize the industry. Now, just before I ask you that question, Chris, Miles, I just want to ask you, as an engineering project, okay, running something the size of Chrome, let's say Google's telling the truth at the end of the trial.
Yeah.
And there's 3,000 engineers working on Chromium. Okay, how big an engineering project is that? And is that something that is like, I don't know, managing the EU, or is that something like managing the Department of Homeland Security in Estonia?
Well, I think you got to actually separate Chromium from Chrome, because there are other companies that have taken Chromium and they don't have 3,000 engineers and they've turned it into a browser and they've tried to compete in the browser market, right? But they haven't, right? So it's certainly possible to take an open source project and turn it into a commercial entity, right? And so I don't think there's, you could, you know, whether it's 1,000 or 3,000 engineers, it's probably a lot of engineers. Some of that may be in R&D and some of that may be contributing to the open source project itself. And some of that may be looking at the layer of Chrome, and that be the layer of Chrome that integrates with other, you know, Chrome services as well. So I think even if you had 1,000 engineers, okay, and you bought Chrome for $20 billion, you said to an organization, we are funding you at $1 billion a year to run Chrome, right? Because you're going to buy Chrome. Chrome is a brand, Chrome is a product, Chrome is an experience, a design, as well as just code and engineering and its security and all that kind of stuff. There's a lot there, right? It's just not engineering of the Chromium code base. So you could say, yeah, give you $1,000, give somebody, anyone out there, any Chrome engineers who want to come and work on a product that is not just about advertising, it is about making an open web, and it is about making society better and making distribution and of information more free and that kind of thing, but also making the publishing enterprise sustainable and other enterprises sustainable as well. I think you'd find a lot of motivated people, not just engineers, but designers and product people and business people and advertisers and marketers who want to come and join that enterprise, right? So it's not going to be cheap enterprise, but there are a lot of enterprises around with 1,000 engineers that do, and plus people that do products, right? So it's not hard to do a digital product company. A lot of the great ones come out of Australia, right? And the good thing about this is you've already got a platform, you've already got a code base, you've already got a brand, you've already got revenue, right? So it's not like you're some little scrappy startup that's trying to figure out what your product, what your market fit is, that type of thing. So yeah.
Wouldn't you have thought, Miles? You've also got thousands of ex-Googlers who left during various points, probably who worked on Chrome and probably who wanted to do things that Google didn't want to do. So I suspect there's a massive kind of talent pool of people out there, all of whom had ideas about how they might make Chrome a better browser, which didn't fit with the monetization plans that Google had. And you'd find knocking on your door to say, well, actually, do you know what? 5 years ago, we thought about doing this, which was incredible, but didn't bother.
And that's why I think there's a difference between, you could almost keep the same management of Google. What you're changing is the governance, right? And the governance defines the vision and the purpose and the reason for why you are doing this, right? And the governance is away from a company that is, it's an ad company, essentially Google, and it's, does things in its way, to our proposition is a publisher consortium that cares about the democracy of publishing and opinion and the contest of ideas, but also they care about making money as well, right? So you can definitely balance those two there. And if you're a publisher if you're a publishing consortium out of the US and Americas, that's great. But if you build a Chrome that is publisher friendly, you should be. And Ricky, I've talked about it before. I've never been to Estonia, right? So, but I bet there's a publisher in Estonia that services the Estonia market, right? And so the publisher-friendly browser would be good for Estonia, and it would be good for Estonian publishing, good for Estonian society, and good for Estonian democracy, and that kind of thing.
So if you had a look at my infographic that I published this week, I have 6 subscribers in Estonia who work for publishers in Estonia. So I am aware of Estonia's publishing prowess. Yeah, they've also got much faster internet than us, by the way. So maybe we ought to base it there. So look, let's talk about some really serious stuff, right? So the whole point of the internet was to democratize and socialize information. The very first time I logged onto the web, I remember I did it on a Pentium 75 desktop with an AOL disk that I had to put in. It cost me £10 a week. £10 a month as a subscription to open it up. And the very first thing I searched for was idyllic, tropical islands, and it gave me some terribly low res image of an island. But for me, I was born in Africa, right? And so I know, there's this old saying that if you give a family a meal, they'll eat for a day, but if you teach them husbandry, they'll be able to feed their community forever. Okay, that was how I felt the first time I saw the web. I suddenly saw a democratization of information, distribution, and opportunity. Everyone could be a publisher. Everyone could learn everything. Everybody could, spend as much time and effort as they wanted to learn as much as they wanted, and then everybody would have a benefit and a meritocracy. And that's what I saw. And that's why I've been so horrified by the corruption of that model, where it's basically become Google's web for the surveillance of the consumers to sell advertising so it can make more money for shareholders. And I think that that's broken. And so I think that Web 1.0 era has ended. I'm thrilled. So the serious question is how do we make sure that the Web 2.0 that we build is protected from that level of corruption, and we don't just have another 20-year descent into the bad thing? One of the things I've said to Google again and again and again is, you should at some point have recognized that you're biting the hand that feeds you. Now, I've criticized publishers again and again on this podcast and in other places, Chris, with you, saying being indignant about the way that you've been treated is pointless, because that doesn't help you. You need to be smarter than that, okay? Indignation's a bad business model. Think about how you can make things better, okay? And here's an opportunity to make things better. But the question is what does better look like? Is it that we, because we are professional editors and curators, we can be more careful about ensuring that the information on the web has some sort of basis of truth? We can have a plurality of opinions, but let's at least make it some level of truth. And, I get enraged. I know you do, Chris. Every single time I hear, Mark Zuckerberg or somebody else step up and say, but I'm not an editor. I'm like, no, you're not. Get the fuck off my lawn and we'll fix it, right? And so I think that, we're allowed to be proud to be curators of information, and we should allow a plurality of opinions. And people, free speech absolutists say all the time, oh my God, now you're being an editor, are you? So you're like the government. So you're like 1984, are you? My response is, no, we've been at this for about 250 years, and the world worked pretty well through that era. Okay, what we've got is a 25-year aberration after 255 years of actually working media. So all we need to do is to think, okay, well, maybe the 25 years is the mistake, not the answer. And the other 250 years were actually quite good. And we need to go back to go forwards. And so I want to ask you, Chris, you're from editorial, as am I. What do we bring that's better? Why should we be trusted as an industry to take something as big and as important to the world as this forward?
So I think you come back to the point about curation. I think this is a big discovery engine, and I think if you think about it less as a kind of as a a browser, as a discovery, your description of it will find you a tropical island. This is a discovery portal. This is a point of entry to all of the world's information. I think that has a natural kind of curiosity, which is what certainly editorial. By the way, the editorial people I've worked with would say he's definitely not editorial. He's a money guy. But that sort of point about having a publishing mentality, which is about how do we help people discover things that entertain, that inform, that inspire. That's what we have done for many, many years. To your point about the 25-year aberration, I mean, 20 years after they invented the printing press, everyone thought the world was going to be about pamphlets. So there's always a period of kind of early experimentation, which kind of, we've gone down a wrong path, we'll correct. I do wonder, as we have this conversation, I do think it does make me wonder whether in this consortium, when we talk about publishers, we're traditionally thinking about kind of news and information publishers, but whether actually extending the kind of the group of ownership to include broadcast, to potentially include audio, to include media owners, so make it a media owned browser, is potentially quite interesting, because that then says, this isn't sometimes when we talk about it as a publisher portal, you can almost see a vision of that product where it's like the 10 largest shareholders with prominence at the top of the browser, and everything else kind of falling underneath. I'm not sure that's where that product should go. So I wonder about that kind of wider media definition.
I have a vision. I think it's a creator-owned browser, actually. Media is too narrow a term these days. And so, I think that, you have to think about who feeds the web, who is the lifeblood of the web, who is creating that content. Now, it can be someone on TikTok as much as it can be someone that's, a 30-year war veteran, right? I think that we have to have a plurality of opinion. Now, one of the things that I loved about the media, or about the news media at its pomp, was our newspapers contained hard news, soft news, sport, entertainment, lifestyle, health, fitness, all kinds of stuff. But it all sat within some basic rules of engagement. There were rules about what was considered to be publicly acceptable. If you did something really bad, people stopped buying your newspaper, and you learned really quickly what not to do. If you wrote something that was clearly defamatory and was done with malice, then you ended up in court and it cost you millions of bucks. And if you did something really bad, you might end up in jail as well. And if you said something bad about a court case, or did something that was patently illegal, or led to violence or hate speech or anything else, then you also found yourself on the hook for that as well. And it became self-policing in a way, because no one really wants to end up in jail. You can be provocative, but you want to stay within the rules of the law. And I've said again and again and again that the problem with the internet that we've got today is that rules were created 30 years ago to facilitate a wild gold rush where anything goes to see how far this business can go. So we've got Section 230 saying that platforms can write anything they want and not be liable for it. Well, that's the same as giving everyone in the world a pen and asking them to write a newspaper. That's definitely going to end in disaster. And so we have reached the point of disaster. Okay? So Section 230 was terrible. Fair use, the idea that you can rip off anything you want to do anything you like to create a new internet product by not paying the person that created it. That's mad as well. And it probably made sense in 1996, but it doesn't make a ton of sense in 2025. And so era one of the web effectively is ending. Google has pushed it so far that it's fallen off the end of the world, right? And so now as you said earlier on, Chris, this is the opportunity to stop, reconsider, and rebuild, and have a look at what we build next. But the difference between web then, 96 to 2000, and web today is that one platform already exists for almost all of web consumption. So there is an enormous responsibility that comes with whoever decides to pick that up.
And I think, you know, I think it needs to be a set ownership, a consortium. You can't have, you know, a million owners, right? Maybe in some kind of Bitcoin, you know, nirvana, you could have a million owners, right?
It's not going to be owned by Bitcoin, I promise you that.
No, but you know, everyone can, you know, pay by Bitcoin to have. I own a millionth of Chrome, right? So but you've got to have something. You've got to have a clear governance. Otherwise, from a product perspective, it's not going to work, right? It's going to be managed by committee, and that's the worst way to do a product, right? But I think you want to be able to say, here's a set amount of publishers, and that could be the wider definition of publishers as well, right? Not just pure play, big, you know, Wall Street journals and things like that. And they're creating this product, and it's a product. There's competition out there. You don't have to use Chrome. You can go somewhere else, right? And that's, in this browser, you can type any URL you want. You're not forced to type in Wall Street Journal. You can type in, you know, media publishers, opinion publishers from the right, from the left, from the center, whatever you want, right? So we're not constraining that free speech. So you can have a publisher of one that serves a local community, or, you know, some crazy guy on the internet running their own blog post about, you know, conspiracies on whatever they want, right? That's fine. Okay. There's legal ramifications in most jurisdictions about what they can publish, right? I'm not getting to the platforms, because that's not, you know, platforms can operate on any browser as well, right? So, but Chrome is saying, we're going to have Chrome, you know, anyone can still type a URL. If you can't type a URL onto Chrome, you're actually chucking out the baby with the bathwater.
Yeah, I agree. It still remains open.
Yeah.
Chris, you were going to say?
Well, I was just thinking about, you made me think about, there's an opportunity. So one of the big, obviously, one of the big challenges at the moment is about synthetic content, and how any kind of discovery engine is going to differentiate between human content or human created content and synthetic content, how it's going to differentiate between AI kind of tools or agents versus kind of original content. So I think that's one of the biggest opportunities in the product thinking, is how do you enable kind of a navigation that lets people know this is something that's been created by humans for humans. This is something that's been created, you know, this is something that's using AI technology and will help you do other types of things. And this stuff is, you know, if you want to go and bathe in that, that's now on the platforms. Because I do think that I mean, if you look at the kind of the Facebook, the Meta plans around synthetic content, you can see a world in which the platforms increasingly become just this sort of fly trap of you know, you come in and then you're served eye baths for an hour, you know, while they make their money. So I do think that's the opportunity as well, is to have a navigation because you are going to have to take the branding off Chrome. You can't use the Google colors. You're going to have to think about renaming it. You're going to have to do all these, you know, you're going to have to think about what's the positioning of this browser compared to other. How do you make the point that this is run by a different group of people for a different purpose? So there's quite a lot of thought that goes into that. I haven't got very far on that bit.
All right. So with regards to synthetic stuff, you know, it's very clear that, you know, and on the very first podcast you and I did, Chris, one of the things I talked about is that I fear that there's going to be a splinter net where people are going to create their own webs, and governments are going to start to lock out bad actors. So we've already seen France, Denmark, Germany have all had a look at what would happen if they just decided to use DNS blockers to stop anything that they haven't approved coming into their countries. Okay, so so some people think that having a splinter net's not a bad idea. You know, you could log on to lemond.fr and get a very different experience from logging on to lemond.com, right? So, you know, that's a possibility, and that can certainly be enabled potentially with a future browser. But with regards to synthetic content, what I said to you on that very first podcast was that I was worried that we were going to get a Wild West web which was effectively Google's programmatically monetized, stack it high, sell it cheap Walmart web that sits down here, where the majority of the content is either zero or negligible cost for creation. It's junk, but it has junk ads on it, but because of the volume, it makes money. And then over here, you have a premium web, which is probably where the publishers exist. And we leave www, the Wild West web, we leave that behind, and we go to a new one. This divestiture gives the potential that that becomes a reality. And so we create this more premium web. Now, there's some things that can happen in that premium web that I think are enormously important. So one of them might be that all publishers go there, and King make this as the place you go when you really need to know something that actually matters. You can go down here to this Wild West web if you really want. If you want to buy disposable fashion, you go over here. But if you're looking to sit down and have a real conversation about something important, you head upstream over here. That's one thing. The second thing, and also you know that what you're going to find up here has some guardrails and some truth. In the event of a pandemic, this is where you go, right? This is where you gravitate. So I think that's important. The other things I'd point out is that this is probably where the premium advertising lives.
Yeah.
Okay. This is also probably where a single subscription for access might exist. So maybe it's $9.99 for all content forever in this place. So instead of every publisher spending $50 million a year on running the infrastructure of a $38 million a year subscription business, okay, I don't know the exact numbers, you know them better than me, Chris, but something like that, right? Then all of it sits in one single monetization platform, and Netflix for news. But let me just finish on this point, because I think this is really important. What about this as a promise back to the world? Which is that every nation in the world has subtly different laws based on subtly different behaviors and subtly different histories. You made the point last week, Chris, that Europe has a very different view on privacy because it's only just finished with the Nazis and Stasi and the Eastern European problem, right? And so they have a different view on privacy to America, which has never really had that problem. And so we have to be sensitive. If we, as a publishing industry, we already recognize and accept those sensibilities in our publishing industry, it's not that much of a leap for us then to extend that into our digital entities as well. And this is something that Google has never wanted to look at because it wants one consistent, standardized solution. But the problem is the world's more complicated than one, isn't it? And so the publishing industry has done a really good job of navigating that over the years. So maybe in a new Chrome, we can make it sensitive to the laws of Sweden, which are distinct from the laws of Swaziland. And I think that that's something we can do.
And I think you can actually, in a publisher browser, could actually say, users, you take back control of what you want to share with the people who are coming to our browser, right? And then we don't mind. We're not going to suck all that data out because we have other ways, including first-party data, ways that you can ask us, and we can then give you content on a subscription basis or an advertiser basis. And you've talked as well, Ricky, about how the advertising revenue will come back to publishers where they will. If you're a premium publisher, we're both old enough to know when I used to run an ad server before Google bought DFP and things, and we had options in ad servers. Premium advertising was good money for premium content, right? And then obviously they played the games and killed the market, right? And we didn't even think about remnant advertising in those days, really, because premium advertising was so good. Those days are able to come back and respect people's browsing behaviors and identity, and that's almost a magic combination that the browsers can say that GOG will increase consumer benefit, will give that power back to the consumers, because we don't care about blood-sucking data out to them to build a business model for it, right? Because we got a business model already, and then we'll open up the browser for it, right? So I don't know how long you go, but I got one more. As a technologist on the table, I'd love to give this point, right? Because there's a few things going on which I think is important around the open source bit of what's going through these antitrust things as well. So from a technology angle, Chrome can be open up. We can, if publishers own it and it's on Chromium, they can open up Chrome better. That Google has locked down. We'll open up Chrome a lot more. Part of the remedies, I think, that hasn't been decided, and you keep me honest on this one, Ricky, is Google search queries. So Google will have to open up the search queries and the search results to others, so anyone can use those search.
The secret
queries.
sauce, yeah, the
Yep.
Big Mac sauce is about to be revealed. Yep.
The other remedy for DFP is to make DFP open source as well, so that anyone can then go bring their own
and free.
Yep. And all the ADX open data API, ADX open data, so that's another openness there.
And free.
And I might be biased, but that's a lot of open source, a lot of open data. You combine that with WordPress, which is an open source project and runs 43% of the websites on the internet, 60-something% of all sites that use a CMS use WordPress, right? The power of open source to bring this new economy to users and empower new businesses to say, okay, with all this openness, the economy is going to change. New businesses will spring up and power them, and the publishers will say, cool, we're going to provide the gateway for that openness to this new open economy, right? So that was just my knowledge.
Agree with all of that. Chris?
I totally agree with that. And I think also you're going to be hopefully the fastest adapter as that world kind of plays out. At the same time, by the way, as all of the AI kind of consumer-facing product models play out, one of the things you're doing then is you're doing it with the traffic and the visibility of how people are actually navigating the web. I think the opportunity is absolutely, you're not going to compete on price. It's going to be free. Ricky, to your point about a premium web, I think the whole point of this is the danger was always that you would end up with a kind of a slop web and a paid web. And those were the only two models available. And that's not great, because there's a huge amount of people that won't necessarily pay but deserve better information.
Or can't pay, right? This is the problem. You're creating a dual value society, which is not what we're about.
Don't think you want that. So this idea of creating a kind of a consumer champion web that's very much focused on the consumer experience and how you help people navigate the information that they want, which would increasingly be compared to a platform experience. You would be able, as a marketer, that's a dream, because you'd be able to clearly differentiate the things that you were doing that were on behalf of the consumer compared to the things that were being done on, in deep platform world that were on behalf of, advertising optimization. And we all know that as these cases roll through, we know the Facebook case in September is going to make extremely clear how decisions are made in those large kind of ad funded platforms. So I just think it's a massive opportunity for one of the things I would say, if you're creating this new organization, is actually having somebody super smart to think about the brand positioning of how you would set this out as the kind of the finally something that is on the side of the consumer. I think that's incredibly welcome. Look at all the numbers at the moment. That there were some numbers in the UK about, I told you this the other day, 48% of Instagram users wish it didn't exist in the UK under 35s. I mean, there's rarely a product that will have 2 or 3 hours a day's worth of usage where people are looking at themselves in the mirror afterwards and kind of going, "What the hell am I doing?" So,
heroin. That's about the same response. I think.
Yeah, I've never surveyed heroin users, but yeah. So I think the timing for this is very good as well. There is a question, just to be, just think about the revenue side. I do think you're going to have to make a decision on that side. On if you were a pure consumer champion, you then have to balance the privacy, the data, the level of advertising, kind of targeting and integration. And so there's a lot of thinking, I think, at that end to be done. You would probably give up, I would have thought, some advertising revenue because you weren't absolutely maxing out ad load, ad yield, data extraction.
I think you will. Yeah, my thinking on that is that you will probably lose some volume, but you'll probably make it up in CPM. So I actually think that the premium piece will go back up again. Okay, so here's something that doesn't get talked about enough, but let's be really clear and put it on the table. When a publisher, I'm not going to name them, did a deal with Google not very long ago around video, and Google said, if you put your video onto YouTube, we will market it, give it enormous amounts of traffic. We'll sell it on your behalf, but you can sell it if you want. But if you can't sell it, we'll sell it, and we'll give you 60 cents on the dollar, right? Okay, great, they said. And so then what happened was that they put their video onto YouTube, and they put their video on their own pages. Google then went to all the advertising agencies in that country and said, don't buy that video from the publisher, because we've now got it. Buy it from us as part of your trading deal with us. And we will overlay it with a whole load of data that we have. So don't whatever you do buy it from the publisher. So the publisher then found that their video sales collapsed, couldn't work out why. Then what happened was that Google said to them, well, you can sell the inventory on your video if you sell it at $4 CPM. They were previously selling it at 16. And so they put their price down to 4 and they sold it, all right? But Google said, why don't you let us do it? We'll sell it for 6 and we'll give you 6. So they then handed it to Google. Google sold it to the agencies for $80.
Yeah. I really think that's the market you're closing in terms of Google's obviously making a lot of money off advertising and taking it overseas, right? So that's going to come back to the advertiser and back to the publisher as a fair market price, right? So,
right. So to your point, we have to break this hegemony that's existed. Okay, we have to break it, and it's being broken. Actually, we should say thank you very much indeed for the DOJ, Jonathan Cantor. Thank you very much indeed for all your fine work, sir. But here's the thing: if you take the Chrome and the internet and you give it to honest actors. Now, I know it's very hard for a lot of people on this call and a lot of people that don't work in the publishing industry to think that we're honest actors, but there's a considerable difference in the honesty of what publishers do and what Google has done. So stop looking at what they say and look at what they do. Okay, you don't want to be harvested. Your data sits in Google 900 times. They've bought it from everybody all over the internet, fair and foul, and from God knows where, from Belarus and from everywhere else, right? But with publishers, at least you've got someone you can go and have a go at. You've got somebody you can ring. You've got somebody you can talk to. You've got somebody that the law will come after. These tech companies have got so big that you don't have any of those accountabilities, okay? And so giving it to publishers, you're working with someone who you can go and see and fix. And a politician can ring and fix, and a court can prosecute and win. And an editor can be called to account by the Prime Minister. This is a very, very different situation. You've turned something massive into something manageable. And that's really what can happen. And for everybody that thinks, well, the publishing industry's misbehaved for years and years and years, it's kind of sometimes been naughty, but people pay heavily when it goes off the rails, okay? And there are no rules and regulations really whatsoever until now with antitrust on big tech. And so building the next phase of the internet has to be done in a way that's accountable, has guardrails, and also sustains the industry that supplies it. That's why I think the publishing industry is the right organization to take it forward from here, because we can be honest actors, and when we're not, we'll pay.
Can I
just on that? Can I ask a question? Sorry, can I ask you a question, Miles?
Yeah, go. You go, mate.
Just on you just mentioned something that made me think. The cybersecurity kind of integrity overhead of this is pretty immense, isn't it? In terms of those 3,000 engineers, because one of the things you would be taking on, Ricky, would obviously all of the questions around just the integrity of information, uptime, protection against what must be a constant kind of onslaught of denial of service attacks, etc. Is that priced into those 3,000 engineers?
Well, let's call it 1,000 engineers, right? But it is because, as I said, there are other browser companies who have taken Chromium and not taken Chromium, just built browsers, and they're secure browsers as well, right? So it's rocket science, but it's not rocket surgery, right? So it's very durable. With people a lot smarter than me, but once again, that's just governance and that's just management of creating a company, just as other companies have to be secure. And they're very very secure open source projects, right? I know about WordPress, but WordPress runs the White House, it runs NASA, it runs News UK, right? So there's a lot of people who get a lot of nation state threats coming to it, running off open source projects as well, right? So I wouldn't say that's a concern.
Chris, I can give you the numbers. So engineering and R&D, $800 million US, includes browser security, WebKit, Blink Dev, Chromium Ops. Okay, 800 million. Security, scanning URLs, making sure that we're not sending people to sites that contain various malicious software, 200 million. Support and localization, global support, language packages, everything else, 100 million. Legal and compliance, okay, 50 million. That tells you that they weren't taking it very seriously. I think we'll take it a lot more seriously. So,
yeah,
I'm intending to spend a lot more than that.
Yeah, lawyers don't come that cheap.
no.
That's right. Well, actually, Google's probably spending that right now a week, actually,
Yeah.
defending itself from all the attacks it's under. CDN and infrastructure, 300 million. Okay. Total OPEX, estimated OPEX, somewhere in the region of 1.5 billion US. Google said in the court case it was 3 billion US. Even if it is 3 billion US, it's still a drop in the ocean compared to the size of the prize.
Yeah.
I got one more thing, Ricky. You said something, and it resonated with me last time we talked about this, was with the way Google sucks out money out of the economy, and that money is going to come back to the local economies, to the Australian economy, to the publishers, and to the Estonian economy, right? That would be a reason why foreign, governments around the world would actually support this, because it's actually saying that revenue is not going to come out of our economy anymore. It's going to come back into our economy. Those companies are going to pay taxes.
Taxation.
And you're going to be able to build hospitals out of these things rather than building Google profit, right?
So not everyone was on that call, Miles. So I'll repeat what I said before. So at the moment, there was a number actually came out just the other day. I haven't got it to hand, but Meta announces that it pays tax of 11.75% across the world, okay? But in the jurisdictions where it's bullying, it's in single digits. Yeah. Okay. And remember, it only pays tax on its profits. And no one actually knows what its profits are, because the majority of the people that are buying its products are mums and dads spending $50 here and $75 there, a bagel shop. And it's the same with Google. So no one really knows what their profit is. And no one knows, therefore, what their real taxation is. So if they're announcing 11.75%, that's the number they're proud of. Okay, so the actual number is probably 4. Okay, and so that's a real problem. And so what I was saying to Miles, and I've had this conversation with you as well, Chris, is that if you're a politician and you've promised your electorate that you're going to build them a new hospital, and then they come to see you after you've been elected and say, can we have our hospital, please? And you say, oh, I'm sorry, I haven't got any money for that hospital. Okay, Google and Meta deliver $15 billion of revenue, top line revenue in Australia. So we know that across the world, that's 350 billion US. So that's 680 billion Australian dollars, on which they're paying 3 or 4% tax. That money is being earned in every tax jurisdiction in the world. And every time a country tries to tax them at a reasonable tax rate for a company of 25 to 30%, they get absolutely nowhere. And when they ask for details of what their earnings are, they get absolutely nowhere. And when they try and prosecute them for tax evasion, they get absolutely nowhere, because there's no single source of data. And what we have is we effectively have a global public utility run by a profit-motivated company with zero transparency. This is insane. And history books are going to recognize that that makes 0 sense. And so 0 cents equals near zero tax. Ergo, probably a better outcome is to give it to someone else that makes a commitment to pay appropriate tax in the jurisdictions in which they operate. Now, Miles, you're ex-News Corp. Chris, you're ex-News Corp. I'm ex-News Corp. I can pretty much guarantee to you that News Corp doesn't pay full corporate tax. I'd be absolutely certain that that's true. But I think it's going to be more than 2 or 3%. And in return for standing up our industry again, and in return for having the opportunity to build a sustainable future web that everyone's going to be a part of, I think we are willing to make concessions as an industry to be a good corporate actor, to take back our industry that's being silenced.
And if this consortium is not a good corporate actor, do you think the DOJ would be onto it as well?
In a heartbeat. They've already shown that they will. So I think that you've suddenly found that being a good corporate actor is probably the best business outcome. Do you know, I wrote this a year ago. I basically said, like, the best business model, okay, for you as a fiduciary responsible company is to stop doing this, because the outcome is going to be a breakup, which is the definition of bad fiduciary management. Chris?
I think, I think we should do the right thing, but we're not communists. I think
that's right.
There's a middle ground here. one thing I would say is one of the most nervous people watching the current kind of DOJ trial machine rolling through has to be the Irish Chancellor.
Oh yes,
because
my goodness.
so much of this money is washed through Ireland, and it's such a big part of the Irish kind of services economy. And he's got obviously between digital services and pharmaceutical going through Ireland at the moment. It's just billions and billions of dollars coming through there. So I imagine they get up every morning, kind of wondering how long till that tap turns off.
Can I offer a funny story on that? So somebody jumped into from the Irish government jumped in as a subscriber. And so I always pay attention to who the new subscribers are, because there's sometimes interesting people that drop in, and I send them a note. And so I sent this guy a note, and I just said, hey, look, it's great to see you jump in. I'm really interested to learn more, because, you're doing amazing with the digital economy. Got this lovely note back. I was hearing his lilting accent in the email, It was lovely. And then I said, dude, would you like to come on our podcast? He was like, what do you want to talk about? I was like, taxation, cricket.
Yeah.
Those smiling eyes turned dark, disappeared into the distance. So, look, have you had a look at house prices in Ireland recently? They are insane. And so I suspect that if you're a property investor in Ireland, this is the worst outcome in the entire world for you, right? But look, this is the start of a revolutionary conversation. The idea that the people that write the content that runs the web take back control. Miles, you nailed it earlier on. They take back distribution, discovery, and monetization. All right? Okay. I talk a lot. I try and roll this up into the story of my life as a paperboy. Who else was a paperboy? Were you a paperboy, Chris?
Yeah.
Oh, God, yeah.
Right. How much did you earn to deliver the papers, mate?
Like a $5.
Right. How much do you reckon the editor of the paper earned?
Quite a lot.
So what we've done is we've made the paper boys the trillionaires, right? We've created trillionaire paper boys. The people that deliver the news are the people that made all the money. Now, they might have outsmarted us once, okay? But that's kind of at an end. And now the people that create the content, the people that spend the money and invest in creating the content, the people that have a vested interest in making sure that content engages the audience and that people care, that they inform people and people keep coming back, all of those things are back in this corrupted economy whereby the people that do the tech and the people that do the delivery are the people that make all the money needs to end. And this is an opportunity to give the power back to the people that care most about a healthy internet, which are the people that consume it and the people that write it. And this is our window, right? So it's going to take some time. We've got a lot of work to do. But the DOJ, I mean, I can only offer a round of applause. They have taken on a big fish. A big one. And they've landed it. Okay. And now I think it's kind of incumbent on us. It's our responsibility at this point to take on the job from here for them.
Well said.
Good. All right. Thanks, everyone. No one sent a question. We've obviously scared everybody again, mate. No one's talking to us. Look, if anybody's got any questions, I'm going to post this on the Substack in the next day or so. Please send your questions in. We're here to answer your questions and answer some responses. Look, you may agree, you may vehemently disagree. We don't mind. We're actually very open to all opinions. But look, what we do appreciate is you investing the time. An hour is a long time, I understand. But this is kind of an hour invested for the rest of our digital futures, right? So let's give it a go. Thanks very much indeed for joining. And gentlemen, thanks very much indeed for bringing your brains to the party.
Absolute pleasure.
Catch you next time.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.